2024 school board meeting to order. Regarding action item 1A, public access to meetings. This meeting is open for public attendance. You may also watch the meeting remotely via live stream. Agenda item 2, we have meeting opening and roll call. 2A, roll call and verification of quorum.
Ms. Bushman,
Here.
Mr. Robbie,
Here.
Ms. Portson,
Here.
Ms. Erler,
Here.
Mr. Lepak,
Here.
Mr. Kowalski is excused, Mr. Pope,
Here.
Mr. Shader,
Here.
Mr. Summers.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Agenda item 3A, we have the pledge. If you could please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda item 4A, we have a Mandana Bliss Award presentation. The Mandana Bliss Award is a symbol of our deep appreciation for the unwavering commitment and outstanding efforts demonstrated by our staff members for educational excellence in the Stevens Point Area Public School District. It is named in honor of Mandana Hale Bliss, Stevens Point's first school teacher and trailblazer whose exceptional service and dedication continue to inspire us all. This award lends us the opportunity to shine a light on remarkable contributions made to this district by our staff and recognize their exemplary service. And so I'd like to hand it off to Corey to present the award.
So this month, we are recognizing Rose Gallagher, who was a special education teacher at Bannock Elementary School. And along with her tonight is sixth grade student Ethan Shaleen. So I would like to ask Rose and Ethan to come forward to the podium.
Dear Miss Gallagher, thank you for making my time at Bannock so special to me. You let me have breaks, teach me how to read, and help with all my math. You are so nice and are my best teacher. Love, Ethan S.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a few words?
Well, I've just enjoyed my time at Bannock, and I've gotten to know Ethan and his family over the last 4 years. So we're going to miss you at Bannock next year, but I love all that you did and all that you said, and I appreciate you. Deal?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you.
We're going to go in the middle and take our picture,
Then we're going
okay?
to go stand by the middle of the table.
I forgot, Principal. Would you like to come up? Sorry.
Ethan. Yeah, we gotta go around and shake hands. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for.
Thank you, Ethan. You did a great job.
Ethan, a wonderful speech.
You've done a wonderful job. Ethan.
Well done. Way to go.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well deserved.
So nice.
Yes. Can I say that's always my favorite part of the meeting? Wonderful job, Ethan. Hi. All right, moving on to agenda item 5, public comments. Did we get anyone sign up for public comments? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6, we have presentations, and we will move on to 6B, our communications report with Sarah O'Donnell.
Okay, we have a clicker today, so we're gonna see how this works. Oh, I got excited. Okay, so we'll start our communications report with our media coverage. In public relations, over the course of November, we released 7 press releases out to our local media. We received really good coverage from those releases. We also had, we were on CNN, not for anything to do with any of those press releases, but they picked up a letter that we shared locally with community, and I would say did a decent job of not ending up on all of the national networks from that. So that was exciting. Looking at our social media engagement for the month, we're up a little bit in both total audience and total impressions and engagement. So we saw increases in both Facebook and Instagram, and we had this very sweet video out of Washington on Veterans Day. They had SPASH grads come in that are currently serving in the U.S. Marine Corps as reservists, teaching the students how to salute. Adorable, absolutely adorable. Just started kind of doing this thing on the internet, so it's up to 188,000 views, 76 comments before I turned them off, because at some point people were commenting just things that really had nothing to do with our community at that point anymore, so we just turned comments off for that. And then 6.8 thousand engagements, so likes, loves, all that good stuff. So that was really, really nice to see them get that recognition off a very short video that someone grabbed in the back and shared with us. Website and digital, we are 11 days to launch. I'm not concerned at all. I'm not concerned. I'm just like at that point where, you know, like nothing is going to be like perfect, right? So we're working on getting it as close to perfect as we can. Obviously, we're through all major content navigation updates. Schools are doing an amazing job, folks that are working on that level to really comb through that content. I think right now I'm having 4 to 5 meetings a day, probably for the last 2 weeks, of people just, hey, can you walk through this with me? Hey, can you make sure I didn't miss anything? Hey, does this look okay? So I've just been really impressed and just so grateful for folks to take this seriously and really make sure that we are putting our very best face forward to our community and beyond. Staff trainings, I've been doing a large one a week, and recording those so folks have access to that information afterwards, but can also get some live training as needed. And then obviously doing kind of those one-on-ones as requested. Everyone, I just share out like a little link. They can schedule time with me, and I've been traveling a lot, which is great. Final updates, I've been doing a weekly just out to those webmasters with the checklist just to kind of remind them of what needs to get done before we launch. We will be including a feedback mechanism when we launch, so we'll have a pop-up on that front page on all home pages that just says, hey, we have a new website, things may have moved, you may need to recheck your bookmarks, with a link to just say, you know, if you catch a broken link or if information is moved and you just can't find it, let us know so we know we need to move it around or do a better job of just kind of how we've redone that navigation, or fix that link. Accessibility and compliance, we've done, I think, a really nice job of making sure that everything on there is accessible, specifically for screen readers and color contrasts. And then our launch timeline, like I said, we're looking at December 19th. So we'll launch and then we'll go into break. So if anything is really, really wrong, I will have all of break to fix it. But nothing will be. It'll be great. And then ongoing support following that launch, we'll come up with, you know, just kind of that regular support plan to be in place post-launch. So making myself very available to schools should, you know, something really need to be addressed rather quickly, and then continuing to do just those trainings and offering that guidance and support. State leadership in November is the Wisconsin School Public Relations Association Fall Conference. I had the pleasure of being in charge of the conference this year, so that was a totally different experience for me, from being like participating in the conference to being like running the conference. I just did not have enough respect for folks that do that on a really regular basis. We also, Corey came down and had the opportunity to present with me on just what do superintendents need from their communications folks, or I was surprised we had several superintendents in the room that really wanted more guidance on how can I work with my communications person. So I thought that was a really good opportunity for us just to speak there. And then the district received an award of excellence in the video series. We also got the best in category. I have not received that before, so that was exciting. For our referendum video series last year, excellence in writing for the response to the MacIver piece, related to the referendum, and then an award of merit for the referendum campaign overall. So thank you for your support of those programs and those efforts. They were recognized. Then finally, looking ahead at deliverables for December, website launch obviously is, eating, sleeping, breathing, dreaming about that right now. We're also working on a holiday concert highlight video. I'm really excited for that with Fodder Films. Lee is heading out to a number of our schools to pick up some of those shows. So really excited to just highlight our music students in that way during this time of year. And then always working on that ongoing content creation and storytelling. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Sarah?
Again,
I just want to comment on the awards. And,
Oh, thank you.
and Sarah, I mean, you are incredible at what you do, and you put an awful lot of time and heart and effort, and it's wonderful that you were awarded and that Corey was there, and that you were recognized by all of your peers in
Thank
your
you.
organization.
I echo that. Thank you, Sarah. Congratulations on your recognition.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item C, superintendent's report with Corey.
Sure. So we had some pretty generous donations by a couple of our community partners. So Land's End donated a room full of clothing items for our students and families in need. So I wanted to publicly say thank you to Land's End. And then we had Century Insurance donate 500 laptops, 500 docking stations, and 500 webcams that they were looking to get rid of. So thank you once again to Century. They've been a partner that's provided our district a lot of resources. So we're thankful for that. I also wanted to mention that our staff raised $30,556 for the United Way. We did a campaign, so that was nice that our staff are also recognizing that community supports us, so we need to support the community. So thank you to the staff. Polar Pond Plunge was Saturday. Thank you to Will, Jeff Milsna, Sam Dinga, and then all of the other people that plunged. The weather cooperated. It wasn't that bad, was it, Will?
Could have been colder.
Yeah. So Carla and her team just do a phenomenal job out there at the forest. So it was a fun event. In addition, we have our winter break coming up, December 23rd through January 1st. So school will resume on the 2nd. Board members, the incumbents, if you are going to run again and want your name on the ballot, you need to have your paperwork submitted to Lynette by January 7th. If you are not planning to run, you need to have your paperwork submitted by December 27th. And then if there is a primary, that will be on February 18th. And then the spring election takes place on April 1st. Just a reminder to board members, and the community, there is a holiday open community night for the mini golf course at Spash that takes place on December 19th from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. There's also an event that day for board members. We sent an email out, so if you want to go in the afternoon, you can do that as well. And the Panther Pro Shop will be open if you want to stop there and use that certificate that you have. I wanted to mention congratulations to Sarah. You just heard about her awards. That was in my report. I'm not going to go through those all again, but I echo everything that Meg and others said about Sarah. This district is very, very fortunate to have her here, and she makes all of our lives easier each and every day with her communication skills. So thank you to Sarah. I wanted to congratulate Sam Dinga. He was nominated to the Hall of Fame for the Boys and Girls Club. That was in Madison. That was a really moving event also. So congratulations to Sam and all of his support in the community. And then lastly, I want to thank Carlyn. This is Carlyn's last meeting. We're going to miss her immensely.
But will she miss us?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. So thanks, Carlyn. Everything that you've done for me, for the board, for the district, you're going to be missed. But Nicole, I'm sure will pick up right where you left off. She's already got 2 trips planned, so I think she's semi-retiring already.
Well deserved.
Yes, congratulations to Carlyn. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just had one question. We got an email today about the mini golf.
Yep.
And that our staff that have been the backbone behind that forever, were able to take that out and present it. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. I think at least last year, I remember when I went, our staff is not only responsible for running the classes, but also acquiring the materials and also doing all the fundraising to be able to put this opportunity to get together. So
Right.
I'm just wondering if you could let us know, I guess, a little bit about kind of what that recognition they.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it at the last board meeting, but they were nominated to go to San Antonio, Texas, to receive an award and to share about that cross-curricular activity that they do. So they went down there and presented so that others could learn and possibly do the same thing. So those three individuals do a phenomenal job: Todd Vanderloop, Jen Bowling, and Corey Opper. And they fundraise for everything. They spend multiple hours with the students, learning construction, learning math, learning technology. And it's just a really neat event. If you've not had the opportunity to go to SPASH, I would highly recommend that you go there. We will definitely make sure that we mention this tomorrow on the radio show with Scotty as well, so that if there's other community members that want to join, they should do that. So thanks, Meg.
Thanks, Meg. Agenda item 7, consent agenda. This is, I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the prior school board meeting on 11/11/2024, the minutes of the school board retreat on 11/19/2024, the approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and the employment recommendation. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Will. Okay. Any comments or questions? Okay. Nicole, can we please call roll due to the schedule of monthly bills?
Mr. Shader,
Aye.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Lepak,
Yes.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Nicole. Agenda item 10A, we have the Educational Services Committee report with our chair, G. Pope.
Okay, we had, first, we had 2 items concerning this, a change in this year's calendar, and then the approval of next year's calendar. So Chris is gonna go through that. We also had a couple of course proposals, name changes and so forth, and they're gonna go through that also. We also had a report on resource vetting update of the ELA curriculum that's coming. And then Carla gave an incredible presentation on all the stuff she's doing out at Lawson School for us. It was great. Chris is gonna go ahead and take that.
Thank you, G. And the calendar that I have up there is actually the 25-26. If we stay in sequence in terms of how we're agendized, I'd like to talk first about the revision to the 24-25 calendar, which is the calendar we're currently living. We had a recommendation from our secondary colleagues at PJ Jacobs, Ben Franklin, and SPASH to move the spring conferences to a later date. There was some concern just about how close those conferences were scheduled to the change in semester, which typically occurs at about the end of January, and the ability to have substantive information to be able to share with students and families that early in February had been a concern for the last few years. So this was an idea that we had tossed around in terms of adjusting those conference dates for spring at the secondary level. So those have been moved now to the end of March. So they are scheduled now for March 24th and March 27th. And we did also adjust, I talked a little bit about this at Ed Services in this year's calendar. We also did shorten the registration window for summer school. Last year, what we learned is that most of the classes were filled by about 1 week after the registration window opened, and we felt like we were almost making more frustration or creating more frustration by people calling a month later and expecting to be able to get enrolled, and there was a lot of disappointment. So we're going to condense that registration window so that it closes on April 6th. Rather than on May 16th, which we had previously planned. Certainly, we'll have additional registrations that will come in late for swim, for students who are identified as in need of credit recovery, but ultimately, we would hope to close that all registrations on April 6th as opposed to May 16th. So those are the two proposed changes for the 24-25 calendar.
I have a question. When does quarter end?
This is 25-26.
Right, when does quarter end for moving the conferences? Because like if you have it right after quarter ends, it's kind of also,
Well, the end of semester one is January 20th.
Yeah.
Right.
and then
I don't remember the end
third
of quarter.
quarter would be sometime along that March date, right?
Around that March date, yeah.
So you're already
Don't know it off the
halfway
top.
through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking from a high school point of view. It's nice to have something.
A little bit of time.
A little bit of time before quarter grades are due, because sometimes parents get on the case of the students.
Right.
I do.
Which is helpful. Yeah. Which is helpful.
Which is helpful.
Yeah.
And if that's the recommendation, that's fine. I was just pointing out.
Okay.
When are they scheduled for now?
They currently were scheduled for February, so it would have been February 20th and February 24th. Yeah, so we're moving them back essentially a month. Mhm. So it was the 24th for junior highs and the 20th for SPASH
Of March?
of February.
February.
Oh,
Yep,
but you
of
want to
February.
move them back?
We're moving them to
20
March, correct.
25, 27.
25 and 27. 25th will be junior highs, 27th will be SPASH.
Do you have the exact date for the end of the third quarter?
It's not on here.
Okay.
I didn't see it on there, that's why I asked.
Spring
Yes.
break-
Okay, I don't know it off the top
Spring
either.
break's right around.
Spring
Right.
break is right before that.
Spring break's the week before, yeah.
Okay, I'll find out. Let you know.
I'm,
Other questions and comments?
I'm just, maybe that becomes then a conversation about communication
Mhm.
to
Okay.
parents.
Absolutely.
About, especially with kids who are maybe struggling at that end of February time period. So maybe it puts a little bit more kind of responsibility that we make sure that we get that information out
Yeah.
to people individually, and maybe even offer opportunity if parents want to come in earlier and have a conversation, that they have the ability to do that.
To do that.
I like that.
Well, I think parents can come in anytime they can ask to have a meeting with the teacher at any time they're concerned, right? They don't have to wait till.
Oh, of course.
Correct.
So-
Oh, right, right.
That
So-
opportunity's
So
always
if
there.
we're saying schedule a meeting closer to the end of the third quarter as a means of inducing students to do better, so they get a better grade, I can also be viewed as, well, we have a grade now. If you have it even later, you have a grade, see what they did now. Parents can come in again to see how they're doing better.
Of course. Mhm.
But we don't want to schedule a whole nother round.
Right.
No.
we only have
That would be a little
one,
overkill, wouldn't it?
one for each semester, right?
Correct. Yep. Fall and spring.
And again, if we make this change and it doesn't work like we think it's going to, we can always, make a revision for the following year.
Well, we're being asked to vote on it
It's in
Tonight, for this
Tonight,
year.
For this
Yeah.
year.
for this year, but do we know the end of third quarter for this year?
No.
Not yet. It'd be nice to know what week is it.
Do you have
Mr.
it,
Mills,
Justin?
no.
Do you have it, Jeff?
I would like to call Mr. Mills, who wants to
Okay.
say something.
So it's,
of order.
end of quarter is April 4th.
Probably been wanting to say
April
something.
I did, I was kind of moving
April
around.
4th.
He was trying to mouth,
it's
I'm like,
April
I don't
4th.
know what you're saying.
So we did pick this really strategically because we wanted to be before that third quarter, Alex, because we know how important that is. We wanted to do it after spring break so the teachers could remind families before they get time to work. They can come back, get that work turned in for third quarter, but it's also close enough that in my role, right, we want to be really careful for semester failures. Those are a really big deal.
Right.
So if we've got a kid who's not doing well in third quarter, also talking to parents, we need to sustain that positive momentum through. The other piece that I think is important, and Meg, this goes along with yours, is we're also working as part of this to identify kids that are getting Ds and Fs, and teachers are going to be making individual reach outs to those and setting aside a chunk of time at that conference to ensure that we're able to get those families and have time for them to come in, both face-to-face and for the first time ever virtually as well.
I love that. I love that. I mean, just talk about accessibility. And so that virtual option, thank you for
I
doing
also
that.
think scheduling the time is also very nice. Like, it seems a little elementary-esque, But scheduling the time, hey, you have from 4 to 4:20, we would love to see you. It's your time.
Right. And it's prioritizing those students that really need the conversations, because I hear feedback from parents that you stand in line and you don't know how long you're going to wait. And sometimes so thank you for doing that, and
Yeah,
making
that's
that
a huge deal,
enhancement.
huge deal.
Yeah.
So there are scheduling times now, they're not just waiting?
Well, there's individual reach outs is what Mr.
But
Wilson
not
said.
during that time?
During that
Like
time.
elementary schools will schedule a time slot, right?
So we'll prioritize on that day, G,
Yeah.
for a block of the time. So for a chunk of the day, they're going to reserve probably an hour. They're still working on how that's going to lay out, depending on if this gets passed. But they'll set an hour aside, and in that day, that's when they will schedule those virtual and assigned conference times, so parents can get that set, because we usually don't. It's an open room, but at
Yes.
that point, we can slot those time slots in and guarantee it for the families and guarantee it for the teacher.
Huge deal.
Yeah, that's huge.
Huge deal.
Thank you.
Now, just another question. Okay, we do all this, but there's a lot of time between then and the end of the school year, and, kids can slide. I know teachers probably contact students who are failing, are probably in contact with parents quite a bit, and maybe students who are getting Ds or close to failing. I mean, do we want to say all students with Ds and Fs will get another parent contact by such and such a date?
Each building has a requirement around that G, and the requirement is always around that F marker.
Yeah.
That parents will get a contact in
They
that
will.
way. Yep. Now, whether that's an email, whether that's a phone call, there is some flexibility. Some
And
of our
sometimes
SPASH
it's
classes
mailed.
are big. There's a
It's
lot.
also mailed.
Is it from
Yeah.
the teacher or from the administrator or what?
Usually the classroom teacher is where it starts. Now, sometimes administrators will try to pull them together, because it is really hard as a parent to also get 4 or 5 of those phone calls at once. So that's where our SST teams are really important at our secondary sites, because they can help us bring those contacts together and decide if an individual teacher is going to make that reach out, or if we're going to make that reach out in a building level.
Be interesting to see what kind of response you get.
Yep,
I
and-
mean, you guys know, but if you had a percentage of parents that actually contact you back after you make such a contact that their student is failing or in danger of failing. I mean, do you have any offhand idea, like, do you get really good responses?
That would be more of an individual teacher level, G. I mean, I know every teacher does track that. If they reach out, teachers do document that information. I do know for conferences, we will look at numbers. We collect the numbers every year, how many parents attended and how it was utilized. So we'll look at that data to identify if this is the best solution.
I mean, we can request that data. Alex is asking.
We've never gotten that data, have we?
I don't,
Of
to my knowledge, it's
utilization
never been
rates
requested.
Of conferences?
Conferences, so,
And
Not recently, but we have done that in the past.
Okay.
and participation rates for
Yeah.
conferences are oftentimes, principals collect that, and some principals have it as part of their continuous improvement plan. But I don't feel confident saying that they all have it, but I know a number of them included and updated on an
I'd be
annual
interested
basis.
in having that.
And I don't think those, yes, and I don't think those numbers are indicative of like identifying success. I do know lots of parents that say if my students are A and B students, I want to reserve that time for the people that really need to talk, since we all stand in line. I know you're changing that process, so it would be good to see if the numbers do shift from that.
Yeah, I'll make that request to the secondary sites to collect that data this year to be able to bring back.
Jim?
I was because I was a high school student, and I did go to parent-teacher conferences, and the ones I talked to wasn't that many, but I did talk to a few, and actually both of them said, sadly, and this is not a big scientific study, it's only a handful, but both of them said, one, your student's doing well, and sadly, the parents who I would like to see here don't show up. So my kids that are struggling, that I need more help, and I would like more involvement, those aren't the parents that are showing up for the
And hopefully with
conferences, so
the reach
maybe
out.
we can.
Yep, and that's what we're hoping, is that personal connection and being able to say, we're setting aside time for you and your family.
And the virtual option. I mean, again, accessibility, right? So I think that's helpful.
Well, I'd be kind of interested also in, after the fact, after we've done the round of parent-teacher conferences, when we're making the calls to zero in on the kids who are failing or getting Ds or on the cusp of failing, is there, I don't know if we're asking too much, but if there's a way to say, teacher John Smith, you made 7 calls to kids who are failing your classes, what kind of response did you get? Did you get responses from parents or negative or positive ones? I don't know if that's asking too much.
I would have to CG what Jen, Joel, and John, their process that they use to collect that information. I know as a classroom teacher, I had a document log I kept. I'm sure most teachers do, but I don't think that's ever been anything we've asked at this level to see what kind of, how many phone calls have you made where you've gotten a return call? How
Right.
many have you just left a message?
I don't want to do that.
Right. G?
I'm trying to get at the kids who we really want to talk to. I mean, I've sat there and you have through many conferences, so I'm glad you're here. The kids are wonderful, you're wonderful. I want to talk to these people, but they're not here. So I want to see if there's a way to get to those people. Say we only have like, I don't know what percent response to people we really want to get to. And there's a way to zero in.
G, can you put your microphone up?
No.
They can't hear you. Thank you.
I would hate to put more on the teachers' plates, though. That's,
Yeah.
they already, that's an extremely busy time, and I'd hate to say, oh, now you have to keep track.
Right. Teachers do an incredible job. If they can't get a hold of parents, they keep trying and trying. And we've even done home visits. I mean, we have staff members that do home visits with principals. So they'll go out of their way to do anything to make that contact.
And I know the junior highs are testing the ability to track that in Skyward. So that's another thing I can ask them. Is there a way to run a log where we could see that type of data? So I can do some investigating to see what would be available, because I don't want to put more on the teachers. I know they
Right.
do a good job
Right.
tracking that. But if it's something that I can pull to supply, I'll look at that with Carmen.
Or if they're already collecting it.
Correct.
Right.
But minimally, we'll get the attendance rate.
We can get the participation.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's easy.
There might be an opportunity for administration at some level to communicate with parents. I mean, I grew up with a single parent, and she worked as a dietitian at a hospital, and her hours were 10 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, and, you know, conferences weren't really a
priority.
possibility,
Yep.
right? I mean, literally.
Mhm.
And so, you know, maybe there's the opportunity, if we do have some families that just, you know, aren't showing up, that as a district, we could figure out a way to reach out with a short survey to say, you know, what would work for you?
And I
You
think
know,
teachers,
and communicate with those parents to let them know we
do care
want to
about them.
be able,
Mhm.
we care about them, and we want to be able to accommodate what their work schedule is, because, you know, people work crazy hours. And they don't always have that opportunity to show up when we want them to show up.
Right.
yeah, and we have these identified days and evenings that we hold conferences, but certainly the message and the communication to parents is always, if these days don't work, you tell us what does.
Right.
And teachers have been incredibly accommodating. I know in that like 2-week window of time when conferences are running, either prior or after, teachers are setting up individual meetings based on what works best. So I know that those accommodations are made.
All right, so thank you for the questions and the comments. We are looking for a motion to approve the revised 2024-25 calendar as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Made by Will, second by G. Additional comments or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
All right, and next item is moving right on to the 25-26 academic year, which I have displayed up on the board there. This is essentially a rollover of what we are currently living in 24-25. This is based on number of instructional hours that are required at 1,137 for our 7 through 12 students and 1,050 for our elementary students. What you will see captured here is the addition of those 6 additional PD days at elementary. This will be the last year that those will be included in the calendar. That's important to share here for community that happen to be watching. It was a 2-year commitment to get that foundational literacy skills training done for all of our K-6 ELL special ed teachers. And that will conclude at the end of the 25-26 academic year. One other thing that's not reflected here, unless you take the time to count, we always make great efforts to balance the number of days between semesters. And this is the closest it's ever been. So we have 88 days in semester 1 and 86 in semester 2. Usually it's 3 to 4 days, and we we go through lots of painstaking efforts to try to balance that. So I'm pleased to see that this is the closest we've ever been to keeping them balanced. But if there are questions, I'd be happy to entertain them at this time. Alex?
You know, because why not? I'm noticing that we have those same dates in February for conferences for the 25-26 school year. Of the 19th and the 26th for secondary.
Those didn't get moved.
So I just want to point that out, that we are making an adjustment to the calendar for this school year for an issue. And
those were supposed to have been adjusted. This is here's what I think happened. I think this is the wrong draft of the calendar, but the 25-26 calendar does have those 2 spring parent-teacher conference days for secondary in March, not in February.
Good flag.
Yeah, good catch. Thank you. And this is exactly what Dennis would have asked me earlier, and I said, nope, because the one that I have in front of me has it correct. So I think the wrong calendar got updated in board docs, and I did not catch that.
Okay.
Yeah, but it should be the 24th and the 26th of March.
24 and 26th of March.
Yep, so the
Is that
24th
correct?
would be junior high and the 26th would be SPASH.
Rather than the 17th and 27th.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, good catch.
And the
Alex.
quarter ends April 2nd. That purple designates quarter end.
Okay.
So they have less than a week to get grades out. And then how many days do we have if there are snow days?
There are 2 snow days built in.
2 days built in?
We don't say that word. Just kidding.
None of those are going to happen. No inclement weather.
Yeah. Okay.
One can hope, right?
Watch us get like 5 snow
Right.
days now.
I'm thinking the school board conference in Milwaukee. Is
Yeah, that's what it
Oh, yeah.
Usually when it happens.
That is usually when it happens. You're right.
Okay, additional questions, comments? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the 25-26 Stevens Point Area Public School District calendar as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Will, second by G. Additional questions or comments?
With the corrected version
Yes.
with the March dates?
With the March dates. Yep.
Okay.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right,
Okay. And next, this is standard operating procedure on an annual basis. We have our secondary course proposals, and I'll pass that to Jeff.
So I get 2 with you guys, and this is the one I get really excited about. So every year, we get to do our secondary course proposals. Annual item that we bring to Ed Services, which we did last week. Now we're before the board. These are for the 25-26 school year. You'll notice there's kind of the memo that you guys have in front of you, but there's also going to be documents that are attached that are summaries, and then all of the course proposals that are there. The 2 things that I do think are really important for everybody here to know is when we do this process, we want to offer those opportunities for our kids, but we're also really careful to try to maintain FTE neutrality at our building sites. So that's been the discussion that we've had at the secondary level when we've looked at these course proposals. In addition, none of these courses have a fee associated with them. So you guys approved the fees last month. We wanted to make sure that there's no associated fees attached to these courses that change at all. So the 2 that we're going to look at, the first is junior high. For the junior high, there are 2 name changes that are there. These are currently Gateway to Technology 1 and Gateway to Technology 2. These courses were Project Lead the Way courses that we've had for a long, long time. SPASH has gone through the process of changing names away from them. We no longer work with that company. So the new names for those courses will be Technology and Engineering 1 and Technology and Engineering 2, which is much more descriptive to our parents, because when you're a parent and you see Gateway to Technology, having been there, I have no idea what they're talking about. So they will be there. The standards that are covered are still the same, and the content is there. So that's the junior high, 2 name changes. The second part of this is SPASH. So with SPASH, what we have is we have 3 name changes. And for those of you that have been on the board for a while, you know name changes happen a lot at the secondary level. We want to try to get students excited about learning. So if you look at one of the first ones, it's going to be the sports. They're changing the name from advanced marketing, which sounds super exciting, to sports and entertainment marketing, which is responding to what our students are saying they really want to dive into. The next name change is one I'm really excited about. This is Project Life 101 and 102. We're going to change those names because we're going to actually be aligning to a curriculum. These are classes that are designed for our students that are our special needs students. These are very targeted classes. And these name changes show that we're making an alignment to curriculum, which is something we didn't have in the past. And a huge shout out to Jenny and her team. They've worked really hard with SPASH to make sure we're putting this curriculum together for those students. So those are our 2 classes with the name changes that are there. We do have 1 new course proposal, and that is going to be Poco a Poco. This is a vocal jazz ensemble. John has tasked Luke Adson to continue to look for new options to get students involved. And we've run this program over lunch, and the numbers have gotten so big now that we need to offer this as a class. So they have that one set up and ready to go, and they've piloted it over the lunch period. Voluntarily, Luke did that. The one I'm the most excited about is the last one, which is a revision for credit. We offer speech right now at SPASH, and we have been in conversations with Midstate for almost a year and a half, because what we've wanted to do was be able to offer our speech class for dual enrollment credit, and we have been able to secure the teachers and that option with Midstate. So starting next school year, every student will get dual enrollment credit for taking SPASH or speech at SPASH.
Questions or comments for Jeff? Jim?
Yeah, and I brought it up at Ed Services, I'm gonna bring it up again. When it comes to speech, I value the idea that our kids need to understand speech, and I question because it's not in state law at all to require speech, and we are one of the only districts in the whole area. I just found out tonight Rochelt apparently does as well, that makes speech a requirement. The state requires 4 English courses, or 4 credits of English, but we're the only one we're one of the only ones that require speech. I still don't understand why we do that. I was told it was a standards issue. I went and pulled the standards and looked at them. There's a reason why I think all of our neighboring schools incorporate those standards into their other English courses, because it's quite easy to do based on what the standards are. There's only 5 standards really that were listed there. 3 of them were listening standards, and 2 of them were speech-related standards that I cannot imagine aren't easy to do because all of our other neighboring schools are doing it. And one of the things I got back as a comment was, well, we shouldn't necessarily be doing what all our neighboring schools are doing, but when you look at our state report card, all of our neighboring schools in English are performing better than us. All of them, with the exception of 1 school around here, and that was Rochelt, interestingly, also makes them take speech as a requirement. And I guess I don't understand why we do that. I don't also understand why it's only offered to 11th and 12th grade. It should, if we're gonna have it open, it should be offered to all high school students. I don't understand why that is. I mean, the speech standards run from 9 through 12 anyway. And what do we do then if, since none of our other neighboring schools require speech as a graduation requirement, how do we address a transfer student? So if all of our, so we got a kid from Rapids who decides, holy cow, that SPASH hockey team is awesome and I like their curriculum there, I'm gonna move to SPASH, and they've basically already met all of the English standards. Do we make them still take speech? If they have already embedded all of the speech standards in their English coursework, do we then still say, oh, well, we don't care that you've met all the standards, we're still gonna make you take a speech class? I love the idea of what you're doing with making a dual credit. I think we should have more dual credit. In the research, I found that, well, my wife found, she did most of the research on the neighboring schools, found that some of our neighboring schools have a far more robust relationship with Midstate than we do. Even though we got a campus here, Rapids has a better option, Marshfield has better options for dual credit in English. We're doing it in speech, but they have it in multiple English courses to allow credit. Don't think we have any others, do we?
Mm-hmm.
We do in English?
Janessa reads AP.
In English?
Yep.
Okay, great. That's a good thing. I'd like to see more of it.
Yep. And I'll kind of break it up, Jim. The second part of that, part of it is we've got to have teachers with a certain amount of background. They have to have a master's to be able to do that.
That's
so
correct.
Janessa was the one that we actually worked with our new program to help her pay her way through to be able to do that. So Janessa now can. For speech, we're able to do that because our 2 teachers are certified. That's why you don't see a lot of people have them in math, because it's really, really hard to keep a person with a math master's in education. The second part, I know one of the pieces with speech, I've talked to John about this. Mr. Vollendorf really does look at and say that that speech requirement, the design of that is they want students engaging at 11th and 12th grade level, the conversations. For those of us that have kids at home, what I can engage a 8th, 9th grader in and what I'm going to engage an 11th and 12th grader in conversation is going to be different. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that was one of the justifications they had at targeting that 11th and 12th grade with that. So that was a big piece of it.
I think if you're in the building, you're at SPASH, at least we change the requirement down to 10th grade and allow them to take it. And why eliminate them? I think there's definitely mature enough kids that are coming in as sophomores, and we're just arbitrarily saying, nope, you're not a junior, so.
I think it's good feedback, Jim, and I think as part of program review, I think these are certainly things that we're able to look at more closely. We talk about program review, and I know we've been looking at that kind of alongside of where to identify like budgetary efficiencies. What we've also learned is we have opportunity for program enhancement, and I'll talk a little bit about that tonight when I give the program review, and I think this is certainly an item that could fall into that category. So I think I appreciate your sharing it at Ed Services and bringing it up again.
So when is the appropriate time to formally discuss that and actually openly discuss making that change?
Well, we're not positioned right now to teach speech in our English classes, so we would have to go through, some curriculum revision and then bring a proposal forward to the board if it's something that we felt was a good thing to do for students.
Okay, so I'm gonna go Meg and Dennis, or I don't know.
Meg's
Meg,
first.
okay.
So, I'm gonna put my parents' hat on. I'm not gonna have my school board hat on, because I'm talking about the experience of my son with speech and SPASH. I think it's essential that kids learn to read critically, to think critically, to speak critically, and to write critically. And the wonderful thing about that speech class was it truly focused in on speech. It focused in on the various types of speech, argumentative,
Persuasive.
expository, descriptive, instructional. It really focused kids in on understanding about that in a very focused way. And so again, from a parent watching my son go through that class, and then watching what he went on to, now he's a 2nd grade teacher, but what he went on to do with that background, for me, as a parent, I felt that it was incredibly valuable. So I'm gonna say, I'm deferring to our administration, because I'm not an educator, but I saw firsthand that what focused speech is, and that is much different than introducing it scattershot within various, whether it's English or social studies or whatever classes. So I put that out. The other point about kind of when kids can take it, I think it's about, again, that level of kind of scholarship that those scholars have at the time we're teaching it. It's also staffing. And so I think that that's an important thing for us to take a look at, because if we are focused in on having that junior senior level of learning, we only have a certain number of speech instructors, and especially with these new requirements that we have with MSTC to ensure their dual credit. I think we've got to be real careful, because we are trying as a board to keep things kind of staff neutral, so we're not having to hire additional to provide that education kind of where we at now with where our budget's at. So I'm going to just put those 2 ideas out there.
Thanks, Meg. Okay, Dennis.
I'm just strongly in favor of offering speech. I don't think there's a lot of research to indicate that districts that offer speech score lower on English in general. I know it's accurate in our area. I am concerned to the extent of when it's offered, I could see that 10th graders would be fully capable of taking a speech class. But I think it's a soft skill that is really becoming even more and more and more important. When I was in college, they talked about soft skills and how important they were in terms of the workforce, and I didn't believe any of it. But after I got in the workforce and I interacted with hundreds and hundreds of people, I saw how these soft skills really, in many ways, were the difference between people who succeeded, people who were highly regarded, and people who weren't as effective because they were not able, in this case, to communicate, to persuade, to analyze, to speak off the cuff. So I think I know that we can only offer so many classes, and I appreciate the fact that there are some classes, districts that don't offer it, but I think it's the right thing for us. I would be, like Jim, saying, hey, let's look at possibly expanding it a little bit further.
Okay, Will, and then Jim.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we look at students in universities, we look for skills like that. When we're looking for students to enroll, it's required at most universities to graduate. You have to take some sort of speech requirement, which is why I think it's fantastic that we're adding the mid-state credit on there. And even if students aren't planning on going on to higher education, that's fantastic for them, but that's something that employers are going to look for when you're writing a resume, when you're sitting down in an interview, when you're working with clients, whatever it might be. It's a really critical skill, and as somebody who's 24, a lot of my fellow peers do not have those skills, and it really shows with their success. So,
Thank you, Jim.
I think, I'm not arguing we don't offer speech. I'm saying we just don't have to require it, and that a parent then can decide, or a student can decide, do I need it, do I not need it? Especially when we're struggling with our proficiency in the things that we're testing. Grammar skills are not where they need to be. And we're substituting that for a speech course that is already being covered, again, in multiple other classes. It's not required by the state. It's covered in the standards. It's easy to cover in the standards. And we talked about having more choice for the students and the parents, and I'm not saying don't offer it. And if we have kids with a choice, would that not mean that there would be kids who wouldn't take it, and so now our demand for staffing would go down? We're worried about staffing. Well, if there's kids that, quite frankly, I don't think I'm not going to bash auto mechanic, but I don't think my auto mechanic really needs that. The kids that go to school, yeah, they get it in college. That's already required in college.
So I feel very passionate about speech, having both my bachelor's and master's in speech communication. I know we talked about it, but this is where I'm comfortable with our district being an outlier and requiring this very critical skill. I think if we left it as optional, we would see many of the students that could benefit and need it not take it. And I think regardless, whether they're in the workforce, go on for advanced degrees, I think this is a transferable skill regardless of what you're doing. And when you think about even technology today and some of the things that we try to address in the buildings, what people are just not communicating face to face, and having people just prepare them, the critical thinking on the credibility, the emotional appeal, the logic, all of that is just critical as a standalone. Again, I'm biased because that's, what I chose to pursue, but I think that is something that is just, it's going to help prepare our students to be successful, which is very much aligned to our commitment. Yes, Dennis.
Sorry, follow-up question. Jeff, what about the comment or the question regarding that if you take all the standards of speech, they can actually be incorporated into these various other classes? What's the feedback from, or the pushback or whatever from administration to that suggestion?
I think it would be aligned with what Meg kind of talked about. They identify areas in speech class where the students dive in, and it's more than just they're going to talk about that. If it's a speech that they're going to do that's going to be persuasive, and they're going to talk much more about that in a speech class, where as a science teacher, I had kids give speeches in my class. I didn't talk about that because I would say to them, you're going to learn that over here, right? I think in the English class,
they may have a portion of it in the class, but it's not going to be to the same value and
the depth.
The depth.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I would really like to offer it to all the buildings, all the students in the SPASH building. I think by us saying we're doing a disservice to students that could really excel at it earlier and then carry it through that building and their experience at SPASH. So if we could just look at what that staffing would look like and what the implications might be, opening it up, I think at least to have that conversation would be helpful. Yes, G.
Am I correct in saying that it's gonna be a dual credit class, or it is already?
It will be.
Will be.
It will be
not
next
now.
year.
It is not.
So a kid can get dual credit so they can achieve a speech credit at Midstate. And then if, say, some kids take some courses at Midstate, then transfer to the university, can that speech credit carry to the university? Because the university requires speech of every student, right?
Yep.
So if they did that, they would not have to take speech again.
Correct.
Correct.
They could, but yeah.
Yeah.
I would.
Unless you're Jen's kid, then you
If you're Jen, you could.
Who had another question? Did he? Okay. Any other questions for Jeff or comments? If not, we are.
Actually,
Yeah,
I do.
sure,
Now
sure.
that I have, is there any reason why, is this strictly in person? Is there any ability to make, because I know particularly Midstate, they offer online speech coursework. Is there any reason why we could not offer this in the OLC?
Through OLC, we'd have to have one of the teachers certified to do that, Jim, and then we'd have to build the course out. That's definitely something that we could talk to John about. I would very much like to see Mr. Vollendorf. I like the option of a hybrid option, even something, is there a way we could fit this into a summer school schedule where it would be a hybrid, where they do some face-to-face and then they'd be able to do some virtually? I think that would be very doable. We have to have the teacher willing to do it, so that would be part of it, but that's definitely something I can add to my conversation.
In the digital age, it's easy for kids, I mean, kids are filming themselves doing TikToks all the darn time, right? So,
Yes, they are.
and
But not as much in our schools.
And
No.
Not anymore.
Not in the schools, not anymore.
And I know my student
anymore.
does, daughter at home is, got 4 online classes and she has to video herself doing things online, to send in as a presentation for multiple classes every semester. And so that's already a thing that she's doing. If you look at the actual what's going on in a speech class, a large portion of what happens in speech is sitting and watching other kids talk. So
So, but
there is some benefit to that, yes, but
that's the nub of what speech is. I mean, the essence of it is that ability to craft it and then to present to others, and to also be present and to learn from others who are presenting. I mean, it's an incredibly interactive opportunity for our kids. And to me, whatever walk of life you go on in, once you leave us, you are going to be in communication with others, hopefully. And as Jen said, I just think it's so important that we encourage our kids to be. None of us are comfortable speaking, and I think kids are intimidated even by the concept of speech, because no one wants to get up in front of an audience and speak, but it provides so much learning and so much maturing and so much opportunity and so much support. I mean, to me, it's just kind of, to have a speech class online, I think you'd lose a lot of the learning that happens in our classroom and our speech classes.
maybe. But I will say, we're partnering with Midstate, and Midstate offers it online. So,
Oh, they do offer
Yeah.
the online, okay.
they do. My wife took it online for her college coursework and transferred it to Stout. So, yeah, it's available online. It's possible to do.
I'm going to motion to approve the proposed 2025-26 secondary course updates and revisions as presented.
Okay, motion by Will, second by Dennis. Additional questions or comments? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Okay, motion carries. All right, so we are moving on to agenda item, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. We're moving on to agenda item 13A under general. We have our 2025 WASB resolutions.
Yep, so I just wanted to remind the board, in your board docs, in your packet, you have the proposed WASB resolutions. Peruse those. If you see anything that you need more clarification on, if you have any questions, if you have any objections, let Nicole know by January 3rd. And then we'll bring this back to the board meeting in January for you to take action on so that G can represent the board at the delegate assembly at the convention in January. So just take your time, look through that. Cabinet is doing the same thing. So we'll have information to share at the January board meeting as well.
It makes for good bedtime reading. It'll put you to sleep. All right, thank you. And let's move on to.
Invent that.
There's less of them
I
this
read
year.
every single word. I really do, but it does put me to sleep.
G, we are thankful that you
Yeah, we
do
are
that
grateful
job.
for your, yes, representation for us on behalf of us.
Not so sure.
Well, I think they're grateful because they don't want to do it.
Nobody wants to do that.
All right, moving on to agenda item 13B, we have our safety and security report with Jeff Milza.
So within the safety and security report, the pieces that I had that I wanted to review with you is in December, we always do our annual report. But before I went through that, I just kind of wanted to do a shout out. This is an area where we've needed to dive in and focus more as a district. And we needed to put some more structures in place. And it was a great opportunity for me and I've really enjoyed it, but that's because I've gotten to work with some great people. So for those of you that don't know Lance Lewis, who's up at SPASH and does safety and security up there, he has been a phenomenal worker on this right alongside of me, and the other one is Chris Budzinski. So it is really what you're seeing here is the hard work of the three of us, and we will acknowledge all three of us, we're not done. But what we really want to be able to do is provide an update to the board. Basic background for those of you that don't know, this all started in March of 2018. Wisconsin legislature passed Act 143. Part of that is we have to make a report to the school board on where we're at on safety and security within the district, and this report is part of that. In the summary section, we kind of identify the 4 required things, and we're going to do more than the required tonight, but I'm going to do so very quickly. The first that we're going to give you is the date of the required annual safety trainings that are held at each of our buildings, and every building, I'm happy to report, completed those. A written evaluation of the drill, and that's a big shout out to both Lance and Chris. They are at each one of those buildings, walking through with their building principals to make sure that they have the support they need to do that. And then the school safety training. So each one of our buildings does safety training. In addition to that safety training, we also had all of our leaders engage in a reunification training at the start of this school year, along with a overview of the standard response protocol, which is what we use with the I Love You Guys Foundation. And then number 4 on there, you'll see that is the data that the governing board, and that's really Lance, myself, and Chris pulling together for board members. And that identifies that all safety assessments were completed October 15th to December 15th. Within each of those, we do an audit at the school site when we work with law enforcement. Those are not publicly shared. If any of you would like to see or get access to that information, you are welcome to email me directly and we can share that out to board members, but we don't include that in our board packet. So the 2 attachments that we shared with you, the first one is the annual report. So as I mentioned, if you look to page 2, you will see each one of the school drills outlined that we've completed with building principals. So each of those are outlined on the date that it was completed. And we have each of those pieces. In addition to that, one of the things I did want this group to know is we've also added a monthly meeting with our police department where myself, Lance, and Chris get to meet with police and just check in on how these things are going and making sure that we're doing the proper safety pieces. One of that has led to us working more closely with our private schools and helping them set up rally points. And also we're going to be meeting with them and supporting them in leveraging Woodlands Church as a reunification site because we want every one of our students in this town to be safe. So we are working with them as well on that piece. So that's the report. You guys will see on there, there's a spot for the signature at the end. This is something we do every year so that you guys can see those pieces. But the other one I wanted to draw your attention to and I included was an update. I shared with you a roadmap. I told Corey, if you're going to ask me to do this work, that we're going to do it right. So we're going to set a plan in place and a timeline. So in the roadmap, the one thing we did add was the monthly check-ins with law enforcement has been added. If you look at page 1 to the safety and security roadmap, we've added that in. In addition, we wanted to be able to show the school board, if you look at page 3, the actual budget. So what are we actually spending our money on when we think about the safety of our students? So you guys will see the items that we've completed and the items that we have that are still pending. Each one of those items come before our leadership team for safety and security. And then if it's an item that we want to talk to the large group, we bring to the task force. So that group still meets. Some things we just bring to the leadership team. One of them is, for those of you that have been to PJ's, one of the safety concerns we had is as you enter that building and you look where the cafeteria is, those are large open windows, and it would be very, very easy for somebody to see in there. It was a huge safety concern. So Chris Budzinski worked with a couple of different vendors. We're actually going to put a wrap over those windows, which will allow the students to see out, but nobody else will be able to see in, and that will have a safety mesh on it as well. So that's one of the big items. But each one of those will be outlined, and I will provide updates to the board on each of those as we go throughout the year.
This is incredible work, so thorough and such critical work. So thank you to you and Lance and Chris. Other questions or comments for Jeff?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you, Jeff.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 13C, we have our school board self-evaluation results, and I'm going to invite both Corey and Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello.
Hello.
Right. So included in your packet was just a printed version of kind of what those results were. I want to go ahead and take you through those question by question. We won't spend a lot of time, so the deck looks long, but I promise it won't take too long. So just a brief reminder, your self-evaluation process is a little bit different this year. So we shifted, 1, to bring that process back in-house, 2, to go to a semi-annual, really goal-driven self-evaluation. So something that gives you the opportunity to reflect on the work that you're doing relative to the goals that you've set as a board. And then 2, really hoping to give you some insight a little bit earlier in the year to say, kind of here's what you're thinking as a group, here's what we're seeing that folks are really aligned, here's some opportunities for improvement, and then we will survey again later in March. So the goal is to really give you that opportunity to see what that looks like over time. Again, really focusing on those key elements, so strategically aligning those goals, giving folks an opportunity to reflect, always keeping that continuous improvement model in mind, and then providing some actionable feedback for your consideration. So results, questions 1 through 20 were multiple choice. We did have 100% response to the survey well before its deadline, so thank you for that. I just wanted to mention for those that did not have an opportunity to see the survey, those first questions were on that ranking scale, that rating scale. So 1 would have been that an individual strongly disagreed, and 5 would be an individual strongly agreed. So as I'm going through these, and likely as you are going through these too, I'm looking for places where we see folks that are really aligned, and maybe some places where we see some higher variability in the responses. Those may be places that we just want to pay attention to a little bit more. So here we see we've prioritized and supported initiatives to increase student achievement in ELA and math. We won't go that fast. Our decisions and discussions have consistently prioritized supporting strategies to accelerate growth for underperforming student groups.
Can I ask, what was number 3 again? I can't remember. Is that like?
Neutral.
I don't.
Neutral. Yep, 3 was neutral. Yep, good question, Jay. I'm sorry, I should have specified that. 3, we review data and receive updates on student performance in ELA and math. I do want to say this one surprised me a little bit, just given the retreat that you had that specifically dealt with data, but I think it's because of the timing of the survey. You had not done that yet. So something to reflect on, maybe 1, was the timing off, or 2, was it the type of data that you were hoping to see?
Can we ask a question?
Please.
Okay, so on this particular one, it's been a while since we have come to the board and shared with the community a math update in the secondary buildings, right, with the new curriculum. So is that, I'm just asking the board, is that the kind of data you're looking, and maybe no one wants to.
It's a question to think about,
Yeah,
right? Maybe
question to-
not
yeah,
an
Let
answer that
Corey
we'll have
just know if that's
immediately,
the type
but
of data that you want to double click on.
right. Question 4, excuse me, we've consistently supported the superintendent and district leadership to identify and address barriers to student achievement. We see a lot of alignment there. Our board trust accelerators have strengthened relationships among board members. High variability for that question. As well as for number 6, we have engaged in activities or discussions that promote trust and collaboration within the board. We have committees that are used effectively to achieve our goals. We have clear and open communication among all board members. Our relationship with the superintendent has been increasingly collaborative and supportive. We have effectively communicated our expectations and goals to the superintendent. We have worked as a united team with the superintendent to support students and staff. Our discussions and decisions have reflected a strong partnership with district leadership. We receive updates on the district's targeted programming. We gave some examples there. I think this would be another question from administration, just to think about what that might look like for the board.
And so I'm just gonna pause on this one, because this was kind of, has always been a conversation, because, you know, we have a committee structure. And so this year, for the first time, I'm on Ed Services. And so as a member of Ed Services, I mean, that's what I'm receiving. I mean, each meeting I go to, not all, but it's a focused part of the agenda. Those reports, though, don't always come up to the full board. And so it's a matter of, if board members happen to be present at a committee meeting that isn't the one they're on, or if they miss a committee meeting, you know, because they're out of town or sick or whatever. So when I kind of filled this one out, I just kind of wondered about this, because I think part of it is just the structure of our committee. And I know it's something that we've struggled with forever, you know, the difference between committee structure or a board of the whole structure. But I just throw that one out.
It's interesting you share that too, Meg, because when we were reviewing this as a team, this question came up again as, I don't know that this is a good question. I don't, like, rereading this and seeing these results, I don't love the way this question is worded. 1, targeted, what does that mean? And 2, like, we gave examples, but I don't know that those are examples, right? So, like, I've already given you an idea, like, put an idea in your head before. So we've talked about potentially revamping this question. That said, I mean, a majority of respondents do feel that they are receiving those updates.
Right.
Maybe if you were an individual that fell in that I don't know, or I don't think we do, that might be a good opportunity to say, hey, this is what this looks like to me. You know, we don't have to do that publicly at a board meeting, right? That could just very easily be a conversation with Jen.
And just to piggyback off that, regardless of what board you're on, you have access to the agenda and the documents, but there's also collateral that's sent to committee members if someone wants more of an understanding of the data. Can we just share it with the collective board? So regardless of whatever committee you're sitting on, you're also receiving that data. There's been instances in board meetings where people ask questions because they don't sit on a particular committee, and somebody responds, well, we shared that with the committee members, but not all of board members. So I think that would be a good actionable
Yeah, I like
kind
that.
of, yeah.
I like that.
And that's an easy shift.
Yeah, thank you.
Question 14 was, we maintain strong governance practices and adhere to our policies and protocols. 15, we've successfully led as a united team, making decisions that reflect the best interests of the district. We evaluate the district's financial statements on a monthly basis. We have made progress in building and maintaining trust, both within the board and with district leadership. We've supported administration in the creation of a safe learning environment for all students. We've supported district leadership in implementing safety initiatives and protocols. and we've received updates regarding the district's safety measures, as we just
Just tonight.
a few comments I wanted to pull out. The last two questions were open, which was great. It gave us an opportunity to kind of just look through that feedback. What specific actions or behaviors do you believe have most effectively contributed to the board's progress, towards its goals? Program review to determine academic efficiency came up several times. Cell phone policy enforcement. And then trust accelerators, better communication, excellent board leadership. Trust accelerators were mentioned multiple times in the comments of a positive addition to kind of the board's practice and procedures. And then what areas do you think need improvement as we work toward the 24-25 goals? I apologize for the typos in this. We don't do near enough to address problematic behaviors, and until we do, none of the programming changes or initiatives will matter. Someone commented the prior priorities seem to contradict at times without anyone acknowledging it. And another individual stated that perhaps there was a better way to review the monthly business expenses. So as we went through this, I wanted to pull out and highlight for you some key strengths. One I see is certainly supporting for strategic goals, your support for strategic goals. So I think that is, I don't think, a surprise to this board. You had very high ratings that indicate that you are very focused in supporting not only district leadership, but the district as a whole, really targeting in on that student achievement, which I think is reflective of the conversations you've had and really positive, and fostering a safe and inclusive learning environment. That collaborative governance came through very strong. So you do have strong trust and communication among board members and with those that you're collaborating with relative to district business. And then a commitment to oversight. So seeing some of those scores were really near perfect on a lot of those like true governance areas, I think really lends itself to be a highlight of success for your sound governance practices. Opportunities we may have seen for improvement, that data engagement. So I think really just enhancing your role and articulating those clear expectations. So just what is it that you're hoping to see? I don't necessarily think it's that there isn't information being provided, but maybe it's not the right information that you would be expecting. Clarity and transparency are also opportunities for improvement. I think there's always opportunities around communication person. And program accountability, I think just, again, maybe that opportunity to highlight what it is specifically that can be brought to you to help make sure that district is staying accountable relative to just what those expectations are and meeting your goals. Focus areas for consideration, facilitate those data-driven oversight. We've talked about that a bit. Promote that governance framework for collaboration, so really getting clear on those governance practices and policies to support that professional and constructive discussion, specifically looking at those trust accelerators. I know you've spent a lot of time, one, developing them, and then two, really living them in practice at your meetings. So I think that's continues to be an opportunity. Strengthen that program accountability, so continue to articulate those expectations for program evaluations as we continue to move through that. And then strategic support, focus on enrollment and retention. This came up quite a bit in the comments, just folks thinking a little bit more ahead towards, you know, what does that look like for enrollment as a whole? And then how do we potentially go about, one, getting that data, and then two, pairing that with stakeholder feedback. So as we're kind of walking through some decisions that I think may be coming our way, that we are well poised for that. That is that end of that report.
Questions, comments?
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, absolutely, my pleasure.
General question, general comment, I liked it. I liked that we were responding to questions that we actually, have knowledge about.
Relevant.
And that are really focused on board versus focused on administrative responsibilities, so.
Yeah. And for those newer to the board, I think the previous survey was what, 50, 60-ish questions?
It was lengthy.
Not all, and very wordy, and not very much related to our work. So the board decided, and I know G and you were very instrumental in saying, hey, can we do this more often? So these are the pulse points, right? We'll have more check-ins. And it was at, I mean, no cost, right? Last year, yeah, leveraging, so.
I like that part.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank
Well,
you.
the
Thanks,
one
Sarah.
thing that I just would remind us is when you make up your own questions, there's an inherent bias.
Mhm.
And we have to be careful of that. You make your questions up not knowing yourself that you may program the answers that you want rather than the ones you should get. I didn't see that in any of this. I'm saying that's something we have to watch out for. And I would like to see, actually, we have it now, but a comparison when in March.
Yes, side by side to see.
That'd be easy for each one of us to do individually, but it would be nice to see.
Yeah, to see if we've progressed
Are
or.
we gonna change the questions? I mean.
No.
It sounds like you might refine one question just based
Just the
on
one.
feedback for clarity.
Yeah, I think question 13 just needs a tweak, just based on the conversation that we had. But the intent would not be to change the intent of that question or any of the other questions. It really is to give you a baseline. And then I think the conversation would be moving forward. So like next year, my assumption is the board would have slightly different goals for next year, perhaps. So do those questions tweak a little bit there, or do we want to leave them the same so that you can compare
I think there's
year
nice to
over
have
year?
comparable data.
Some, like I'll tell you right now, the difference between agree and strongly agree, I don't strongly agree with anything. But they could be grouped together because they're positive responses.
Right,
Yes.
agreed.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I strongly agree with that.
You
And
strong,
that Likert scale, that 1 to 5 is typically used for evaluation, so consistent with, I mean, and a lot of people, some people are just neutral on everything, right? So, and that brings down the weighted value. Okay, all right, thank you, Sarah. All right, let's move on to agenda item 13D. We have our budget evaluation process with Corey and Chris.
thanks, Jen. Just over here, give an update on, and you do have a corresponding copy of the full Hanover Research Report that we received back. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of sort of the contents that are included here. This is a 36-page report, so this very easily could have been a 2-hour presentation. Nobody wants that, except maybe me. So I'm going to go through just what I think are the highlights in terms of the research that they conducted for us. Again, this is the first study that we asked them to complete. In other words, we wanted to look at our graduation requirements as a first step in looking at some comparative analysis in terms of how we align with either district peers here regionally or other district peers that might be similar to us in a larger region. And they looked at some districts in Michigan, others outside of our immediate region here in Wisconsin, and also in Minnesota. So as an update here, again, I was able to report last month that we have completed a review of all of those 48 programs. We'll continue to further analyze those 14 programs that we've identified as areas for potential efficiencies or enhancements. So we'll continue to look at those. We'll schedule follow-up discussions with identified stakeholders. I think Meg has brought this up on several occasions. At some point, the program evaluation certainly goes beyond just the folks in this room, and we've identified the need to incorporate and include some of our secondary colleagues in these discussions when we think about where do the true efficiencies really exist. And we'll also maintain analysis, obviously, of the current spending that's occurring. A quick update on position review as part of budget evaluation and program review. We've currently reviewed a total of 363 positions. 342 of those 363 have been categorized as fill as is. We still have some of those positions that are categorized as frozen. This has not changed since last month or in October. And 11 of those positions are still categorized as eliminated. So we've not added to those at this point. This is just a carryover of what we saw last month. The benchmarking secondary academic requirements research project that was completed by Hanover recently really was intended to analyze Stevens Point secondary academic requirements compared to peer districts. In doing this analysis, we're sort of strategically laying out how this program review becomes more specific and granular. At the very, I think, high level, we need to determine whether or not we're asking more of our students, or are we in alignment with what other districts are expecting their students to complete in their 13-year elementary and secondary experience. So I identified local peer districts that we wanted to take a closer look at: Wausau, DC, Everest, Marshfield, Wisconsin Rapids, and Merrill. And then regional peer districts that were generated by a tool that Hanover leverages called K-12 Data Lab. And that is data generated from it's the National Center for Educational Statistics. And they use data that they have in their national database to be able to identify peer districts that are similar to us, both in size and in demographic makeup. And those were the regional peer districts that they identified. So some of them you'll see are in Wisconsin. If you're not familiar, Fraser, Traverse City are both in Michigan. L'Anse Creuse also in Michigan. Midland is in Michigan, and Mankato is in Minnesota.
So only one Minnesota?
Only one Minnesota, correct. What the focus area was for this particular project was to look at graduation credit requirements. And if you look at those, they're on page 4 of the report, I believe was where those graduation requirements are listed. And I'd like for you to also just pause there momentarily and look at how our graduation rate aligns with our peer districts. And you'll see that it's quite high compared to the peer districts that they looked at, both those that are regional and those that were outside of our region. We also wanted to look at academic rigor and alignment with post-secondary readiness, and also considerations and recommendations. In other words, what recommendations would Hanover have for us at this point in terms of enhancements or changes we could make to current programming? So here's that graduation requirement piece that I wanted to call out. Our graduation requirement is 23.5 credits. It aligns closely with regional peers, and that kind of range is between 22.5 and 25. Some districts like Fraser, which happened to be the district that had the largest or the highest number of credit requirements, was 27.5. I wanted to also just point out that there were some recent increases in credit requirements by peer districts in the state of Wisconsin. So Eau Claire increased their electives from 7 to 8.5, and that happened with the class of 2019. And Oshkosh also recently increased their science credit requirement from 2 to 3, a total of 23 credits, and that started with the class of 2020. I think it's important to just note that when we see changes that are happening around graduation requirements, it's rare to see that there's a reduction in the number of credits being required for graduation, and it's far more likely to see an increase based on what's happening kind of in terms of rigor and what we're seeing included in standards. There was no real consistent link between graduation requirements and graduation rates. Example of Fraser has the highest, 27.5, with a graduation rate of 94.4, compared to Stevens Point with 95.6 with a 23.5 graduation requirement credit. Go ahead, Jim.
Just curious, because I know some of our neighboring small schools had more credits required for graduation.
Correct.
But they're also on an 8-hour class day. Is that the case with Fraser, or are they on a 7-hour?
They're on a 7-hour day.
Really?
That's a good question, though. And you're right. So Marshfield has a requirement of 25 credits, and Wisconsin Rapids is 24.5. So just a little bit higher than we are in those two neighboring districts. Stevens Point high graduation rate suggests that current requirements do support student success. When we think, when we do program review, do we need to be beginning with that piece and looking at graduation requirements? The research that they've provided would suggest no, that we're sort of in alignment with what we should be expecting. Some districts use comprehensive graduate profiles. This is an area that they suggested as a potential enhancement called Portrait of a Graduate to define readiness for college and careers. They also suggested that there could be some additional enhancements around how we're communicating to specific stakeholder groups based on what their post-secondary experience or pathway is going to be. In other words, are they heading to university? Are they going to a technical college? Are they going to the military? Are they just going to the workforce? And really defining more what that profile of a graduate could look like, and that was a potential enhancement that they recommended. Eau Claire and Fraser public schools focus on general competencies for post-secondary success. DC Everest really has a very strong example of graduate profile of a graduate. They have specific recommended course completions along with supporting GPAs and recommendations for extracurricular participation, number of community service hours. So theirs is very detailed. Coincidentally, if we look at just the peer districts that were analyzed, we look at highest graduation rate and highest levels of performance in both ELA and mathematics on our state assessments, and pre-ACT and ACT, DC Everest is the highest. So there's something to be learned from a district that's very close to us. I wanted to point this out in the process of doing program review. You know, we're certainly looking for where we can identify efficiencies or savings. Sometimes when we think about enhancing programming, it might be an increase in cost, right? So in the state of Michigan, all of the districts that were identified as peer districts in Michigan are required to have 4 credits of math. In the state of Wisconsin, the requirement is only 3. So I wanted to point this out because I think it's an area that might warrant a little bit of additional conversation and discussion, particularly when we look at math and we look at the course sequencing data that I recently supplied to Hanover in the project they're completing for us now. So what does that course sequencing look like? And how many student or what percentage of students do we have accessing those highest level math courses that we're offering? So how many kids are moving beyond Algebra 2 to say pre-calculus or to calculus or to trigonometry? Dennis, go ahead.
Did Wisconsin at one time have 4 credits and then they reduced it? Is that accurate or not?
I don't, not that I'm aware of.
English is the only
4 credit requirement.
And do we have a sense, I guess, and I'm sorry, I'm going back, sometimes my mind, I'm going back to the graduation rate. Do we have a sense with these peer districts whether they offer any, like Charles Fernandez, I mean, offer any alternative high school programs that are really focusing on supporting students that might need a little bit of help, a little bit more help?
So the answer is yes. All of them offer some sort of alternative programming. The one school that's an exception, coincidentally, also had the lowest graduation rate was in Mankato. Right, and I believe their graduation rate was right around 74%, 74.9, if memory serves me correctly.
79.8.
79.8. So there was a recommendation to consider aligning math requirements with more rigorous standards to better prepare students for post-secondary success. So again, I raised that because it was a recommendation, and it certainly, I believe, will be part of the conversation when we look at that course sequencing data and study that gets shared. So some additional considerations and recommendations to examine the link between course patterns. And again, that's the second study that they're completing for us now, and looking at those academic outcomes. More consistently inform students about post-secondary requirements. In other words, if I've identified as a freshman that I'm going to a 4-year university as part of my post-secondary experience, then I have more prescribed recommendations in terms of what I'm completing, what GPA I should be attaining, what number of community service hours or what extracurriculars I should want to be a part of or participate in. And then also developing a graduate profile was a strong recommendation that they had, and that was included in several places in the report. In terms of short-term next steps, we'll share the findings with key stakeholders and certainly be looping in our secondary colleagues on those conversations, thinking about how we standardize communication tools for post-secondary planning and how that becomes more of a consistent part of our ACP or our advisory time, if indeed there are changes that are necessary there. Some of that communication already happens and exists, so it's just a matter of thinking about, are there opportunities to improve how we do that with more intentionality? And long-term, collaborating with educators and secondary stakeholders to consider the development of that graduate profile. So that's a recommendation that we're definitely going to act on. And that concludes the budget and program evaluation for this month. Again, certainly you're welcome to take a copy of that full report home. If anything comes up based on your review, please don't hesitate to reach out. But at this point, I'd be happy to entertain any immediate questions. Jim?
What were you using? I mean, you maybe have different number. You told me you use different numbers when you look at our neighboring schools. I look at the state report card and I look down to the achievement number, not the overall score. I just look at the achievement number and it's separated out as total score, raw score, and then it's separated out as math and English.
ELA.
And I looked at those. I actually have it right in front of me. Like you said, DCR. I had DC Everest on that state report card on the DPI site, and DC Everest at 58.2 for a raw total score. And they were a little bit better than Rapids, but East, West, Mosinee, Marshfield were all above them. So I guess
we're all higher.
We're all higher.
Okay, and that was the most recent report card?
Yeah, that was the one that we just went over at the retreat, and I had pulled it. I got it on my phone all the time. I look at it.
And you could very well be right based on the most recent report card. I was going by overall score. So DC Everest is, as a district, their district score is still exceeding expectations. But if you look at individual scores for both ELA and math, you're right, there could certainly be other schools and other districts that are
And I get
higher.
that too, because the overall score has a whole bunch of other parameters that are tangentially related to academics, but aren't academic scores. I mean, that's partly why I think we're putting the push on absenteeism.
Right.
Because that's one of the measures.
That's one of the metrics.
Yeah, but when you look at that, I don't put a whole lot of value on the overall score. My value that I only look at really is how are they performing?
And I think it's a really valuable metric to kind of keep a pulse on, Jim. I think you're right to keep an eye on. And what you referenced there, the overall number of points or raw score, to use your term, in ELA and math, and we get those. I think a more important metric for me is to just look at the overall percentage of students that score as either meeting or advanced. So if you look at those charts that are just a little bit lower from where you're getting that data on the lower right of every report card, you can combine those two percentages and really keep a close pulse on what percentage of kids are scoring above that sort of proficiency mark.
This is a lot of information. Could we say that we could have some time at our next meeting to discuss this if we have questions, if people read through this and come up with questions?
The budget eval will come back at the next meeting, so we can most definitely have time to discuss it. Or if you have questions before then, G, reach out to Chris and he can get those answered for you, and then he could include those in the presentation. Because if you have a question, likely other board members do too, or a similar question. Yep.
So clearly you've read the whole thing.
Once or twice.
Nighttime reading. I don't know if this is the right question, but were there any like ahas for you? I mean, both from a positive perspective, from a maybe room for improvement perspective that would be helpful for us as we kind of start reading through this?
So some of the ahas, I think probably the largest aha for me was I did anticipate that maybe we were going to be on the low end of what we require for graduation requirements, and that was positive for me to see that we weren't, that we are very much in alignment. I think the other thing that was a bit of an aha for me just in terms of a potential enhancement or an opportunity for growth within our system is the benefits that many of those districts identified come from that developing a profile of a graduate and doing that work. So I would not have, from an outside perspective, and being in two districts now that didn't necessarily prioritize that in the same way that some of the districts do, I would not have predicted that that has the positive impact that folks in those districts say that it does. So that was a positive takeaway for me in terms of what I think we could enhance our programming by doing or looking at more closely.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Chris?
I think that one of the comments you said, I think was in here was informing the students as they're going, the ones that are are expecting to go on, of what's required. But because I will say as a parent, a lot of that stuff comes from our own research. I mean, I don't think anyone in the school anywhere has ever mentioned the CLEP exam to our kid. We found that out on our own, of the opportunity to get college credit by just taking that test. It's not talked about by any, maybe they are that I'm not aware of, but it's not stressed at all. We focus on the AP course, but there's no discussion on how you can get college credit by taking the aptitude tests and testing out of things at that level. And that sort of, or the idea of, and getting the dual credit stuff, getting as many of those credits you can. And if you actually go to, say, Mid-State and get 30 credits, get 1 year of classwork, a lot of the college admission stuff is completely different for a transfer student than it is for an incoming. And you get that first year done at Mid-State, and it is a third the cost.
I think another thing for just the board to kind of reflect on as you review the full reports, to your point, Meg, what kind of stood out to me is I think, in a system where we clearly value a lot of choice and a lot of autonomy in terms of decision-making for course sequencing and pathways, I think, what you'll see when you review the peer districts that were included in the report is a far more prescriptive approach to what you would take for ELA as a 9th grader, as a 10th grader, as an 11th grader. Same for math, same for social studies. And does that result in a cost savings? Now, what's not included here, right, is a financial component. They didn't dive into any of that, nor would that be appropriate to include in this type of report. But I do think that there is potentially something for us to learn as part of this program review about maybe leaning more toward a more prescriptive pathway once that's been identified by students. And I do believe that that will result in some financial efficiencies.
So my daughter Em is a high school teacher down in Milwaukee. She works for Reagan High School. She's an English teacher, and it's an international baccalaureate IB school, and they actually do identify they have 3 tracks that they identify, that they work with students to help them, and pretty hands-on, to help them kind of chart that course and make those changes along the way if the student, is looking for that. But it's just been interesting for me to kind of hear from her, observing that experience down in Milwaukee. But again, it's a very much more kind of prescriptive focused. Kids are taking the same classes. Kids are earning the same credits, but the classes have different kinds.
Curated like
Different
experiences
criteria.
based on the outcomes and the
Yeah.
destination of the
Yeah.
student host.
So,
School. Jim, did you have a question?
Nope.
All right, thank you, Chris.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
More bedtime reading for us, so thank you for that. All right, moving on to agenda item 13E, we have future meetings, dates, and times. Our next school board meeting is going to be on January 13th, 2025. We have February 10th, 2025, and March 10th, 2025. A reminder to everyone that committee meetings, Ed Services meets the first Monday of the month at 5:30. Business Services and HR meets the first Monday of the month at 6:30. Moving on to agenda item 14A, enter into closed session. I am looking for a motion to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee, specifically review administrator contracts, including the superintendent.
Second.
Okay, motion made by G, second by Alex. Nicole, can you please call roll for a roll call vote?
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Lepak,
Yes.
Mr. Shader,
Aye.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. All right, so do we want to take a